All right, we should be live. Every week we have problems, people. Every week. Sorry for that freeze frame there, but we are live now. We are still trying to figure out that glitch. Apparently, it's not there in our tests, but when we actually go live, we've got a little issue with that sticking. But we were able to quickly resolve that and figure it out. We had all of this stuff broke down because we live streamed from Mage Titans and Meet Magento, New York, so we carried most of this equipment with us, trying to get it set back up. And hopefully over the next 2 weeks, we're going to try some different things and see if we can't take it up to another level. But thank you for tuning in this week to the eCommerceaholic, where I'm just here to help you get more from your e-commerce store. My name is TJ Gamble, and got some fancy graphics there for you. You can find me on social media just about anywhere at eCommerceaholic. We are live right now. We should be live, and I'm trying to check it and make sure we're live, but we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter Periscope. You can find us at any of those places, but if you happen to catch us at one of those other places, YouTube is where the conversation is actually going on. So make your way on over to YouTube and join in on the conversation, because we have what I think is going to be a very interesting conversation this week. There was a little bit of I won't even call it controversy. There's a little bit of drama on Twitter this week. There was a presentation that Anton gave at Meet Magento, New York, which I was there. I didn't get to see the presentation. We were doing I think we were shooting interviews at the time that he gave this presentation. But it really just talking about PWA, progressive web apps, and the move in the Magento ecosystem and architecture toward progressive web apps. And Ben tweeted that that Magento planned on deprecating the current theming structure when Progressive Web Apps Progressive Web App Studio was in general availability. And so that sparked a bit of a controversy. I think, Twitter is always difficult to have a complex conversation on. So I asked Anton to come on here and to answer your questions. Let's have this discussion. Let's try to, do it in a format that allows you to go into more detail, because I think there's a lot of opportunity for misunderstanding on Twitter, especially around something as intricate as timelines around new technology and deprecating old technology. And when it comes to Magento, the timeline and timing is very important. So my guest today is Anton Kril. Anton, if you would, introduce yourself. Let us know your title there at Magento and kind of what your daily responsibilities are.
Okay, so my name is Anton Kril. I'm Director of Architecture at Magento. And so I effectively run the Magento architecture team. And the goal of this team, in regards to Magento Commerce product, is to synchronize and coordinate all the work that is done on Magento product by all of the engineering teams that we have. We have different engineering teams. We have core engineering, community engineering, sustaining engineering. All of this do a lot of work on Magento product, and we have to coordinate all of that work. So in simple, I consider my goal is to do that coordination and defining the technical for Magento product.
So you gave a presentation at Meet Magento, New York. If you would, fill us in on kind of what that presentation was about.
Okay, so there were actually two presentations. Funny thing, the week before Meet Magento New York, I didn't even plan to be there and do one presentation. And then, well, if you know Marcia, somehow it happened that I was doing presentations. And one of them was about the service isolation. It's one of the big project that me and part of my team and some other people are working on right now, designing the future of Magento services and how we'll isolate them. And then the Friday was the state of Magento 2.3. So this was a presentation where I was talking about what we are releasing in 2.3, part of that PWA Studio. So it was, and during the PWA Studio, I mentioned that in 2.3 we will be using PWA Studio and Vineya theme that will cover main scenario. And I think during that part of my presentation, or during the question answer, while I was answering a question from audience, I mentioned that at some point Knockout.js will be deprecated, and PWA Studio will replace the current front-end, Luma.
Okay, and I'm going to give a little bit of a background there. We try to keep this as non-technical as we possibly can. I know there's a lot of our audience will understand exactly what we're talking about without explanation, but we want to make sure we're welcoming for everyone, regardless of your level of technical sophistication when it comes to Magento and front-end theming. But right now, Magento has a theming system. Their default theme is the Luma theme. It's a little more traditional. I mean, it uses a lot of JavaScript and things, but it also uses the layout XML and a lot of different technologies to produce basically an HTML page that is presented to the browser. Now, progressive web apps are going to be a shift in technology in that it is a JavaScript-based framework that creates components on a page that don't necessarily have to re-render unless that component needs to do so in order to display the page. And it has a lot of benefits as far as caching data and loading data as needed to be much more efficient and user-friendly. So Magento is moving from that traditional theming to this progressive web app theming. And I think everyone I talk to is fully on board with progressive web apps. And they understand the need to go in that direction, and that is definitely the future of e-commerce. I believe everyone's kind of concerned with what was stated, at least it seemed to be stated via Twitter, was the timeline. And I think what most people I talked to were really taken aback by was the mention by Ben Marks, and he mentioned that that the current theming would be deprecated once PWA Studio hit GA. And so, that's probably a misstatement, or at least maybe it's a misstatement, because PWA Studio should be hitting GA pretty soon. And I think that's what shocked and concerned a lot of people, in that is the way we're theming right now going to be, obviously not in the most ideal way, in that it's not a progressive web app, but is it going to be completely obsolete as soon as later this year? And that's why everybody kind of was shocked and reacted the way that they reacted. So let's kind of talk about, in your eyes, what is that timeline? Like, when you say deprecated, exactly what does that mean? But how long will the current theming setup be around? And then, how long will it be, I guess, the right way of doing things? And then, because right now, if you built the site, if you were starting on it right now, you would absolutely build it on Luma, unless you have a little more risk tolerance and you're really trying to push toward progressive web apps. But, how long is that going to be the case, and how long before it's really not the right option at all to start a new e-commerce build? So get your thoughts around timeline there for this transition.
Okay, so yeah. In this conversation, and the interesting thing there is no dates were mentioned in this conversation at all, and I didn't want to mention the dates because it's very early to discuss the stopping of the end of support for Luma. But the deprecation, I mentioned, yes, I said the difference was that once PWA Studio and Vineya has full coverage of storefront scenarios. So to be very clear, it's not happening with 2.3, right? So PWA Studio, the set of tooling, we have PWA Studio that is a set of tooling, we are releasing in 2.3. We are also releasing Vineya, right? Vineya is a PWA theme or frontend storefront theme. that is built different from classical Magento themes. But for now, it has coverage of standard shopping scenario, and when you can navigate your store, you can add products to cart, and then you do checkout for products. But it doesn't have full feature parity with Luma. And of course, we would not be removing or deprecating Luma before we have that full feature parity, right? So with 2.3, very clear, we have PWA Studio, we have the main scenario of Luma supported, but we are not deprecating, main scenario in Vineya supported, but we are not deprecated in Luma. What we are talking about is that at some point when we come to feature parity with Luma in Vineya, we will be deprecating Luma. It will, for now, I can say it will not be at least for another year that we will be deprecating. But also the important thing to understand here is the term deprecation does not mean removal or drop of support. By deprecating we mean, and it's described in our documentation, we mark code base with deprecated annotation and add a link to the preferred API. Right? Why do we do that? Because it's a best practice for platforms. We don't want to confuse developers. So new developers coming into our platform, they want to we want them to be able to clearly understand what's the better and preferred way of building things. We want to, especially for such big thing as frontend, we want to have a single, clearly stated preferred way. Right. So that's what it is. That's what deprecation is. And the deprecated API can be supported for years and years and years. Right? So this, I think, was part of, and again, to restate. 2.3 does not introduce any deprecation. Deprecation will happen later, at least 1 year later, only after we have full feature parity in Vineya with Luma. And after the current frontend is deprecated, it will exist and will be supported for years.
Okay. Right? And I think that was the detail that was missed or overlooked on Twitter, in that we're not talking about, PWA Studio right now. We're not talking about the Vineya theme right now. You're talking about not deprecating Luma until it is at least on par, until Vineya is on par with it functionally. And are you saying that the intention is to have it there within a year? Like, are we talking about end of 2019 is the target? Now, I know target is not the date that we maybe we hit that date, maybe we don't. But is the goal by the end of 2019 to have Vineya completely on par with Luma as far as functionality goes?
Well, again, I will not commit to dates here.
Come on, you're amongst friends. You might as well commit to some dates here. Now, go ahead. I'm just.
Oh yeah, right. Yes, optimistically, we want to have a full function. Maybe some scenarios will be deprioritized, but we want to iterate. So I'll do a step back. With PWA Studio and Vineya, we choose this iterative approach of development. I want to be very clear about that. And I think that the huge benefit there is that people can start to use Vineya and PWA Studio at early stages to build, to support some of the simpler storefront scenarios. I consider Magento and PWA Studio and Vineya a time saver for people. So if you have a project of 1,000 hours to build a store, Magento will save you 700 or 800 hours by covering some scenarios. Same with Vineya. We already support basic scenario. We'll be adding more and more scenarios to save SIs and merchants some time to ready store, right? So we will be gradually, iteratively adding, making sure that after every iteration, this is our goal, after every iteration to have a shippable product, and adding features that will save some of more time and add for customers to build final stores. And yes, we don't have like clear date when we will be ready. We expect within next year to be at a state where we can say that conceptually Vineya has feature parity, but it might be a bit later. we don't have that. I will not give you that commitment.
No, I understand it, and I'm not asking for any sort of commitment, right? We're just trying to clarify. This type of conversation is what we had envisioned would be a big part of what this live stream is. And when there's confusion and there's a topic that people want to know more about, right, we get a little clarity. And I understand that there's, the non-committal response as far as dates go. But if you're watching this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button here. I got a fancy graphic for that. I might as well throw that up on the screen. This conversation is for you. I got Anton on here. I appreciate him agreeing to be on in such short notice, but he's here to answer your questions. So post your questions in the chat. You can tweet them at me, and we will get them on the screen, and we will get them answered. Otherwise, I'm just going to ramble for an hour about PWA. So go ahead and let us know what you want us to talk about and what questions you have, and really steer and guide this conversation. You always ask the best questions anyway, and so I appreciate you helping me make this a better live stream by giving me some good material. So let's talk about the complete eradication of Luma. And I want to say you had mentioned on Twitter at least 1 year to deprecation, and then maybe 2 or 3 years. I want to say 3 years was the actual rough guesstimate given. Is that kind of your anticipation or your target, to where 3 years from now everyone will be building on Vineya and not Luma, or do you maybe have some different ideas there? What's your estimated timeline for this transition?
Well, we expect everybody to start building there's new stores on Vineya, not Luma, using PWA Studio tools much earlier than 3 years. The discussion, there were some internal discussions where things like where periods like 2 or 3 years of support after we have a fully functional Vineya were mentioned. But again, in Magento, you have to understand, Magento listens, right? Nothing is carved in stone in Magento. So it will depend heavily on the state of the market, on how many clients, on how many merchants migrated, and the feedback that we get from our community. And Jason Woosley clearly stated that this we are being clear. We don't have those dates now, so we give some initial proposal, and let's discuss. We'll listen. We'll look at what's happening.
Right. So basically, in your opinion, it seems to be Magento's stance. Obviously, Magento wants to be aggressive. They want to be a leader. They want the latest and greatest technology. They want to make sure that you, as a merchant or a developer, has the tools needed to build whatever a bleeding edge technology you want to be able to create. So, in your opinion, it's really about pushing it out there, trying to get your head around what a transition date looks like. But really, it's going to be up to the community and its speed of adoption and how fast it demands that transition, or demands that the old technology be around. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. It's the same as like if you look at what Magento does last couple of years, that's how we behave. That's what we do. That's we communicate something, then we adapt.
All right, we've got a question in the chat here. Sankulp, I apologize if I mispronounced that. Let me know, and I will make sure I get it right. And Sankulp says, I understand the service isolation being carried out. However, what I am unable to get my head around is, are we getting rid of the view layer in Magento? Blocks, PHTML, layout, those types of things. So you want to kind of dive into that and explain how that may be different in progressive web apps, and how it may be similar.
Okay, so blocks, layouts, controllers are all part of our current presentation rendering that uses server side, that renders content on server side, right? And with PWA Studio, PWA Studio tooling, React, Redux, will be the preferred APIs, and they will be taking that role. So all of the front-end logic will be that. And the PWA Studio and Vineya will talk to Magento instances through GraphQL APIs. And so we have in development Vineya with PWA Studio and GraphQL in parallel. And of course, there is no place for blocks, controllers, view models in that model. So, but admin, as you probably know, we do not do anything actively on admin right now. So admin will still use all that rendering engine, server-side rendering engine. So that server-side rendering engine, layout and blocks will be maintained, will be supported, will be the main engine until it's used by admin.
All right, thank you for that question. Keep your questions coming. Again, we're here for you. We're here to answer your questions. It's going to be boring sitting here watching me drink for a half an hour. So keep those questions coming. What was that?
Just to add, since the question was related to modularity, sure. I want to clarify a bit that with modularity we plan to extract services, isolate services, right? So that Magento will support both monolithic deployment and distributed deployment. But anyway, there will be an at least admin backend for frontend that will be leveraging, even if you like, let's even imagine that we are already done with service isolation. We still need, and we did nothing with admin, we still need all of this infrastructure on admin backend for frontend that will be rendering. So if you deploy Magento as a set of the isolated instances, you will still need an instance of Magento that will have this API of layout, blocks, and controllers. Hopefully, but it will be only on single instance. The instance that will be facing admin calls. All the internal instances like checkout, cart, catalog, wishlist, customer, they will not need it because the communication with them will be on through APIs. And the idea is to isolate Magento modules in a way that business logic and REST APIs can live independently from UI, can be installed on separate Magento instances from UI. And I described it in, and there is a lot of, by the way, discussion about the service isolation design. I invite you guys to join that discussion. It's an important topic. It's a lot more complicated than might sound for first time, and there's a lot of things that will be discussed around it. How we isolate UI from business logic? How we isolate UI from APIs? How do we plan to do? Like, for example, one of the questions now is that should we? So we will be introducing a lot of smaller modules, more granular modules, right? And we will be splitting some of the existing modules to granular modules. So of course, for backwards compatibility, we will use namespace composer namespace mapping to have in newer modules to have old classes and not to rename them, right? But should we use new policy in new modules, or should we just follow the same policy? So, for example, module catalog and module catalog API and module catalog UI will all have namespace of catalog and keep the class. There is a lot of questions like that, and it's a good time to join the discussion to influence it.
Absolutely, and we've got Vineya. Thank you for joining, Vineya. Vineya Kopp says, Sankop, great question. I agree. That was a good question. Keep those questions coming. We've got a couple of other ones here. We've got about a half an hour, 35 minutes left in this live stream, so we will get to all the questions. So Jamie Maria from Deity in the chat says, will the new architecture be fully service-oriented architecture SOA?
Hi, Jamie. So it's hard to answer that question because it's generic, and there is a lot of confusion about service-oriented architecture, microservices architecture. So I think in the context that Jamie Maria asks, yes, we plan to support service-oriented architecture. And by the way, the PWA effort and the migration and moving rendering to browser is part of that. Is big and huge first step, and it's part of this overall Magento decomposition.
Next question. Let's see. We had David Sy Deppner, who was on the live stream a few weeks ago. And David asked, when we talk about feature parity from the Vineya theme, are we talking about like feature parity of the basic theme, or are you also talking about allowing time for all of the extension vendors to kind of fully support the new theme as well? So is it really just once Magento reaches what they feel like is feature parity in the basic theme, then we can deprecate the current setup, the Luma theme, or are we going to maybe give module vendors a little more time to make sure that they have that functionality as well?
Yeah, I agree. It's a good question, and let me think how to better answer. So, of course, yeah, there will be some time for extension developers to prepare for that, but it's a bit different from how we did things before, right? Now we have to understand that, again, I'll go back to my iterative development. Extension developers can start developing their extensions with PWA Studio with current APIs. At some point, they will have to start development because more and more agencies will start development of their new stores with PWA Studio and Vineya. And it will happen before we call Vineya fully, we consider Vineya full feature parity. Today, you have to understand, at least a couple agencies I know are starting projects with PWA Studio, new live projects, and they will want extension. They will want extensions with PWA, and during the next 2 years, extension developers will have demand for that, and they will start development. And the release you can expect the standard release of release candidate beta, release candidate preparation, the timeline for releasing Magento. But my main point is that now is the period, the period of preparing extensions can start now with 2.3 when we release PWA Studio and the basic scenario of Vineya.
Okay.
It's a broad answer, but I want us all to shift a bit approach into how Magento. You have to understand that we are trying to shift how we do things. We want to be a lot more agile, release early, communicate early, give you working solution as early as possible, so that you can adapt. Of course, there is a price for those who jump a lot earlier of possible breaking changes. But again, with iteration, with more decoupled modules and the more iterative approach, the communication will be more effective. It should be much better than Magento 2 beta program.
Okay, and again, if we need to go into more depth, if there's any, if we miss any nuances of your questions, please clarify in the chat. Again, we are live on multiple platforms right now: Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, and YouTube. The conversation, for the most part, is happening on YouTube, so make your way over there. Look for youtube.com/eCommerceaholic, and you can find us over there. So we're going to continue to take questions at this point. Keep posting them, please. We still have about a half an hour to go, so we're going to get around to as many questions as we possibly can, and you guys always ask the best questions. We've got one from Vineya here in the chat, And I don't know if necessarily you have the answer to this, or if this is maybe for someone else at Magento is better suited to answer this question. But what is the expected state of the Vineya PWA in the 2.3 release that's coming up? Is it already at feature freeze? What can we expect in Vineya when 2.3 is released?
So I think I mentioned that already, but it's never bad to reiterate that. So we 2.3 we released PWA Studio and as a basic scenario support for Vineya. So I'm not sure what is meant by feature freeze. It's definitely not a feature freeze. New features will be added iteratively to Vineya.
So is it different? Like, because I guess let me rephrase this a little bit. Let me reel back just a little bit. Typically, when you release Magento, you release the base theme with it. So Luma releases with Magento 2, and every time you release a new version of Magento, it may or may not have updates to that theme. Now I know PWA Studio is technically not in the 2.3 release. You're going to release 2.3 that has GraphQL and all of those capabilities, but PWA Studio is a separate release that's expected around the same time. So is this new PWA theme separate from the Magento release? Is it being released with 2.3, or is it more tied to PWA Studio?
It's tied to PWA Studio. So PWA Studio for today is single repository. It has a tooling. It has a Peregrine library, a component library that will be consuming mature components from Vineya and Vineya theme. So it's all, when we talk about PWA Studio, we usually mean this package of things, and it's all the release together.
So with it being released with with PWA Studio, then it doesn't follow the same release cycle. It's not going to be 2.3 and then 2.3.1 we get some new stuff. Like, you're going to be continuously updating and improving the PWA theme in Magento 2. Is that right?
Yes, the goal is to be more agile a lot more agile with development of PWA theme to iteratively add the features and as early as possible. To help SIs to jump on it as early as possible and to get feedback on it as early as possible.
Okay. And it looks like we have confirmation from Eric Irway in the chat using the wrong account, Magento Community Engineering, saying that the same thing. It'll be continuously iterated upon, and it's not tied to a traditional release schedule. So I'm going back through here and looking at any of the comments. Make sure I did not miss any questions. If you have some, please let me know. I've got another one here from Sankalp. Sankalp asks, what are the plans to move away from the traditional rendering for backend admin? Same question I had. I was going to use this one as space filler if we ran out of questions, but another great question here. So if we're going to move toward progressive web apps for the front end theming, but then we're going to have the same old technology for admin theming, how long before we move away from that? Or is there plans at all to move away from that for the admin of Magento?
Okay, I'll be. There is no formal, at least formally, we haven't planned it yet. I had some discussion with Andrew Levine, with Jet Mao, one more, our new front-end architect, and we had discussion about launching a community project that would build a parallel admin, browser-rendered parallel admin that would talk to admins through REST APIs, because Magento REST APIs are more suitable for admin scenarios. But that wasn't launched. We didn't launch it yet. It's just the discussion. So it's the closest, I would say, we have for the plans to start working on it. So again, yeah. But it's more just plans, and we will be announcing whenever we decide to start that project.
All right, again, keep those questions coming. We have one more in the chat here from Alex. Alex Salenko, thanks for watching. And Alex's question is, do you know if some projects already were implemented with PWA and Magento? Do you know, has anyone launched a production website yet using PWA Studio and Magento 2?
I don't know of such sites launched yet, but I know that there are a couple in development now. There are, like, again, I already shared the Inchu theme. I don't know what they did. Have they used it on Real project or not? I showed it. Ramadas first showed it on Mage Titans Austin. They built their theme using PWA Studio tooling. You can ask them, but we don't have live projects in Vineya yet, but we expect to have them fairly soon.
And Eric confirms in the chat as well that no projects implemented, but there's several in development. Mentioned carve.com, which is a good example of a PWA with Magento, but was done before PWA Studio was an option and available. So again, keep those questions coming. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're new around here and you want to see more of these live streams. We go live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. I say just about every Friday. I think we may have James on from Trustpilot next week. We're still working out the details of that live stream, but we want to talk about building trust when it comes to selling on your e-commerce website. All right, so let's see. David Deppner asks a question here and kind of related to Alex's question. Do you have any live sample demos of Vineya out there? Is there somewhere that people can go to see exactly what that maybe let me complicate this a little bit. A place that is regularly updated so people can go constantly check what the latest version of Vineya is. And if we don't have that, is there just any place they can go kind of see where it's at currently?
Oh yes, we have one now, and we'll have more official soon. Hopefully, Eric will share a link in chat. But yes, we are now working on building a cloud demo. But the one that we have for now, it's more development instance. And again, with release, when we release PWA Studio for first release, it will be shared in release notes, the more formal demo instance.
Okay, and again, Eric, you may not be able to post in the chat a link. If you would, just DM me on Twitter a link, and I will post it in the chat. I may be the only one that has privileges to actually try to post a link. It's kind of an anti-spam thing with YouTube and live streams. So the next question is from Sarvish. Sarvish asks, and I think we've covered this a little bit, but people join at different points in time in this live stream, so we can't assume everyone watched the whole thing. So we'll recap that. But Sarvish asks, is Knockout going to be deprecated after the PWA release? And we have already established, Sarvish, that it is indeed, at least Knockout as far as the front end theming of Magento, is going to be deprecated at some undetermined point in the future. And so someday, yes. As of right now, you can continue building with that theming technology, knowing that progressive web apps, PWAs, are the future of e-commerce, and they can give you a substantial advantage if properly implemented right now on your e-commerce site or your client's e-commerce site. But at the same time, there's a risk there in that it's kind of new technology. It's new technology on Magento. A lot of the things Magento's rolling out are kind of fresh and new, and you've got the potential for breaking changes where they release a change and it breaks what's there. So your risk tolerance has to be at a certain level right now to build on PWA. So Magento is going to overlap the two in that your current theming framework is going to be supported for years at this point, probably at least 3 years it looks like, maybe longer depending on community demand. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is someday, right? So it looks like I was. Go ahead.
By the way, I wanted to add that, like same as in this chat, there are people in the community that are on different stages of understanding what's happening with Magento. So there are people who already understand. There are people like, for example, Isa. I read his article, great article today. I have very similar thoughts to him, that the announcement of PWA Studio actually meant that at some point, the announcement that happened a year and a half ago meant that at some point, current frontend will be substituted with Vineya. Some people still don't understand it, and that's why we have to be clarify that to people, and we have to be very open about that information. There was a discussion on Twitter whether we should talk about deprecations before they actually happen. We think that we have to do that because there are so many people dependent on this platform, and we want to give them as early as we understand that something will happen, we should be talking about them. And I, to be honest, was a bit surprised that so many people didn't understand that when, as he mentioned in his article, that's how it was. I casually mentioned that current frontend will be deprecated at some point, because that's how software evolves. You introduce new API, you don't want to have old API. That's just common sense. And the old API has to be removed at some point for platform hygiene. And the only question is, when do you do that, and how gradually do you do that? And on that side, we haven't discussed yet, but be sure that it will not be, there will be no sharp moves with that.
We've got Eric posted a link to that's going to be moving here pretty soon, but for right now, you should be able to go to magento-vineya.now.sh to see the current state of the Vineya theme, and they're constantly updating that. I'm sure that is a dev site, so if it is broken, just live with it and deal with it. I wanted to, and I know we've got another question or two here in the chat, and we will get to those in just a moment. But I wanted to talk kind of a little bit about what you just mentioned, in that, how do we communicate with the community about sometimes tough things like this? Like this is one of those things that's right for the platform. It's right to not support things at some point in the future that are not in the best interest of the platform. But those are not always popular decisions, and it's going to negatively affect somebody at some point. And so as much as I come on here and I talk about from a community perspective, because I'm on the community side, how we react to things and how we voice our grievances in public. And is that the best thing that is healthiest for the community? And I'm open to the debate. Maybe it is. Maybe that's what has the community is very, very successful. And so obviously we're doing something right. And maybe this is one of those special things that makes it right. But on the flip side of that, from a Magento perspective, is putting this information out there in a manner like that, especially in a conversation on Twitter, where it can be easily misconstrued, or you can't provide a very detailed analysis of what you're actually planning. Is that the best way to break this kind of information? Because that is just asking for the type of reaction that we received, right? It's easy to misunderstand, miscommunicate, to not see the full details of that. And I know you were giving it in a presentation and not necessarily tweeting, but there are people in the room who are going to get that information and disseminate it. And would it not have been better to maybe create a very detailed blog post that outlines some thoughts and procedures and asks for feedback? Like, here's what we're thinking, at least framing it like that. Here's what we're thinking. What is your feedback on that? Versus we're going to deprecate the front end, and then let everybody kind of read into that what they will. And so from a Magento perspective, is there a better way, or is this the best way? Maybe this is the best way, but is there a better way to maybe get that feedback from the community to where it just doesn't really just kind of turn into a shit show on Twitter?
Okay, so would it be better if that was a more formal backlog and more details on this? Yes, of course it would be better, right? But do I think that there could be a better reaction from community and, as someone stated it, benefit of that? Yes, of also. So as I said, this when I talk about it, I wasn't doing any announcement. I wasn't saying we are deprecating our front end or something like that. I was talking about the natural, clarifying a bit, a natural flow of processes with APIs. APIs are created, APIs exist for some time, later they are deprecated, but maintained, and then they're removed from main repository. And when by the way, really rarely I do some unique announcements. I never announce some things that were never announced before me. That's why I was surprised how many people thought that it was some announcement. I'm talking about technical things, and I'm trying to talk to technical people about technical stuff. When we are talking about deprecation, again, it's a very technical term. It's described in our document, in our versioning policy, how we do deprecations. I'm not sure if we have a lot of details on why, but it's a standard in the industry practice. So in my understanding, again, deprecation here is just a technical term, technical steps that absolutely normal, absolutely natural for this API. And we will be mentioning that some APIs will be deprecated. We will be mentioning that in future. And Magento is evolving. Magento is a very active platform. You can see thousands of developers working on it. It's not just Magento internal, thousands of community developers working on it. We'll be evolving. Of course, this evolution will require some deprecations. Every such deprecation or announcement should not be perceived as we are killing it tomorrow. Like, please, in future, whenever you see something suspicious on Twitter, something like we kill our front end in next month, please ask a question or don't overreact on that. We don't do such sharp moves at Magento. Many people think about, believe me, so many smart people working in Magento today, and so many people talk to merchants every day. Try to understand their problems. Try to come up with plans. Of course, some of such miscommunications will appear, especially in technical presentations. We will be writing. We will be doing more communication. We will be writing blog posts. We will be becoming better at our communication. But again, in this specific case, we are talking about the very formal thing that was described in our versioning policy for a very long time, and the PWA Studio was announced a year and a half ago, right? So the discussion, if it happened, it's good that it happened, right? It's good that it happened, but I kind of when it happened, it kind of explained to me why the announcement of PWA Studio went a lot smoother than I expected it to go. Just some things were not very clearly understood by community. Okay, we'll be fixing it. We will be communicating that, but we will not be able to guess all of the things where we are not completely synchronized with community. That's why, and it's just my request to not to give us a benefit of doubt in similar situations. It was a long answer. Hopefully, it communicates my feeling about it.
Yeah, and I think it boils down to the fact that, you know, you were just having an in general conversation about something, and using a technical term in a particular way that maybe some people don't understand, and it was taken as an announcement when it wasn't necessarily intended so how do you get that information out there if it wasn't intended to be some sort of big announcement? I understand that completely, and then the definition of deprecated is definitely something that most people don't understand. In that, once you think deprecated, I shouldn't be using that anymore, and this other thing is not fully baked at this point. So it's definitely in
so
this
the
case.
Confusion here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the confusion here is that I think the main confusion was about the date. That was the confusion, because many people thought that we are deprecating it now, but we are not. I will be talking more. People ask me about a lot of things, right? About the future, and I talk about future almost all the time because people want to understand where we are moving. And I don't want to feel very constrained on the discussion. Of course, I'm not doing a huge announcement, but when I talk about it, I use these terms. And when I say something about deprecation, it almost always means sometime in future. Right? So okay, I'm talking too much here.
Hey, you're here to talk, man. This is your live stream. Just keep going. You're good. Don't worry about me. You keep talking.
Good. Okay. So again, the confusion was, I think, I first didn't understand it, but then after a couple of weeks, I understood that people thought that it would be happening somewhere soon. It's not happening soon. Basically, my point is that will this API be deprecated? Yes, at some point it will be deprecated. Will this API be removed? Yes, at some point it will be removed. I'm not talking about dates. Dates somewhere later in future. I don't know the dates for today.
Okay, and again, people are not here to listen to me; they're here to listen to you. So don't worry at all about long-winded responses. I love it. That is what we're here for, is to get the information. And we're running up against the end of the hour. We're going to try to get to all of the questions that have been asked here. And if you have any more, hurry up, get those in. We'll try to get to those as well. Stepan Furman in the chat asks, does Vineya in the current state theme use GraphQL? So Vineya, as it exists right now, is that using GraphQL?
Yes, and when GraphQL does not exist, it falls back to REST APIs. And with evolution of GraphQL and with evolution of Vineya, we will be adding more GraphQL endpoints and migrating some of the steps. Like checkout, for checkout, Vineya uses REST APIs today. And when we have fully functional GraphQL APIs, we'll move Vineya to GraphQL APIs.
All right, so next question from Kane Lagerward. Kane Lagerward, thanks for watching. Thank you for your question. What made you decide on going with React instead of the other popular framework libraries?
There was some internal discussion. I think there was a lot of external discussion. James Zetlin wrote a blog post when we announced PWA Studio, and I think he had some motivation there. But the main reasons for me are it's a popular platform, a popular framework, very well maintained, very well backed up by big company and big industry, and that's just it. So and that makes sense technically.
All right. So, and again, if we didn't answer any of your questions or you want further clarification, post in the chat, and we will revisit them when we get to your clarification. The next one is from Cy Deppner, and Cy's question is, I have had merchants ask me if they should be moving to PWA right now. What is your practical advice for average mid-sized Magento merchants around when to start considering PWA Vineya migration? I'm going to take this one first, and my answer is, Cy, to to tell them to give me a call. Let's have a conversation. Are you holding back on me, man? Come on now. When they get ready, let's have a talk. But from a technical perspective, from the architect at Magento, when is the right time for an average mid-sized merchant to start making this migration toward progressive web apps on the Magento platform?
Again, it all depends on scenarios. Like if you want to understand the safe answer, safe answer is when we have a fully functional scenario on Vineya, right? It means well, when we release it at some version where we communicate that it has a functional feature parity. But and I think it does not completely depend on the size of merchant. It also depends on the scenario that merchants have. Like simple scenarios for simple products with simple catalog, you can start doing that with the release of PWA Studio. And like for example, look at some of the other PWA solutions. People they are very far from full feature parity with Magento, and some of the technical aspects of those platforms, they will not allow them to have full functional feature parity with Magento in the future, right? But people use them because it works for people, because it's an agency has a set of React or Vue developers, and they are ready to work on it, and they estimated that to cover basic scenarios of this merchant, they will not. It will be inexpensive to bring the platform that they choose to the state where they need it to release. And again, technically, there is a scenario supported by Vineya today, right? And that will be better tested and polished at the point of release. If that scenario is enough for you, or you need some couple more features, you can write those features, or you can wait a couple months till those features will be added, a couple iterations till those features will be added. And yeah, so my answer is that it depends on the complexity of your implementation and the store that you are building and what your teams wants to do. It's very important what type of team you have in your shop, and what they want to do. And for simpler scenarios, for simpler implementations, I think they can start looking at Vineya at the moment it is released. Yes, there might be some breaking changes in the near future, but again, look at a bunch of merchants and agencies that are already doing that with very similar PWA platforms out there that are also that also have limited set of functionality, and also have early APIs, I would say, early version of APIs that will be iterated, that will be polished, those APIs will be changed in the future. And many people do that. For many people, this works. If it works for you, start with PWA Studio when it is released. One more advice, I gave it on Twitter, but it's not my advice. Every strong Magento developer tries to do that, or the Magento trainer recommends doing that. I mean people like Vineya or Yes, I heard that at least from them. It's a standard recommendation. Build your code in a platform agnostic way. Isolate your components, make them less dependent from the framework, and it will ease your migration to future platforms. So for example, in customizations, if you build some configurator, advanced product configurator, can always use it, have it as an isolated component that will not depend on current Luma, and it will be easier to migrate it to Vineya later, or whenever you want to migrate it, wherever.
All right, so we're going to go back one question to Kane's question there about React and why React. And we have a comment in the chat from Eric Irway and says that the rationale remains the same as from James Zetlin's post last year on developer experience. And he's got a link in the chat. Click over there if you want to know more about that decision-making process. But then Kane had a follow-up question. Why Redux? Why not? And I'm not familiar with this other framework here. I don't know if that's MobX, I assume. Why did we choose Redux instead of MobX? Is it similar thought process to React, or were there other considerations there?
Okay. Yeah. So the short answer is that yes, it's similar thought process to React. Redux is again, I'm talking about the state and time where the decisions were made. There is React, there is Redux, a popular, stable, evolving platform. I think we burned ourselves before with frontend by trying to make some decisions to make our frontend a bit less dependent on some specific platform, and so we didn't want to choose some specific platform, so we choose the smaller libraries and try to combine them. Some people like it, but I think majority will agree that didn't work very well. Right? So now a lot of decisions on front-end that were made by our front-end architects, by James Zetlin, by Andrew Levin, are and will be to make Magento as standard, use Magento as standard technologies that as many people will be comfortable with as possible.
All right, we are reaching the bottom of the questions. I'm going to ramble here for just a minute. If you have any more questions, get those in right away. We will try to get them answered. Otherwise, we're going to call it a day and go enjoy our Friday afternoon and evening. Again, if you're new around here, hit that subscribe button. If you're into Magento, well, this is definitely the place to be on a Friday afternoon. If you're into e-commerce in general, then you'll find most of the things we talk about interesting. Some you may not. I can't help that. I'll apologize in advance. Again, we're going to stream next Friday. It looks like we're going to have Trustpilot on. We're going to be talking about reviews and building trust on your e-commerce site. Hope you join me. Look forward to seeing you next Friday. Again, if you have any following questions, please get them in. If you have any questions and you're catching this and it's not live, post them in the comments of this video, and I'll be sure to pass them on to Anton or the Magento team and see if we can't get answers for any questions you may have. It looks like that is about all of the questions we have in the chat right now. So I'm going to call it quits. Anton, thanks for being on. Thanks for coming on and clarifying, especially on such short notice. Any parting shots, anything you want to leave folks with before we sign off?
Yeah, well, yeah. One thing I already stated that, but please, guys, we will be evolving our platform. We will be communicating our plans. We will be deprecating things in future. So please be prepared for that. Please be ready to jump on the constructive discussion, and please be prepared for evolution of Magento platform. I'll be happy to answer all questions on Twitter or whatever the platform you choose to contact me. We are open. Please remember, we are open to discussion. We don't do super sharp moves. If you see something suspicious, please make a pause and clarify that thing in future. We'll have a lot of evolution and a lot of great things coming to Magento.
So if you see something suspicious, freak out on Twitter. Okay, let us know about it. Whatever you got to do to get your feedback back out there. Again, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week.